So I welcome now Fatima, who will lead us in our next reflection as we join together in solidarity, resistance, care, and mutual survival pending revolution. Fatima joins us from Al-Hadaf, KC. And Fatima, welcome. We're so excited that you have joined us today and invite you to share with us about how your community is embodying these acts of survival pending revolution.
Thank you so much, Reverend Jess. I appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone for being here. I wish I had been here earlier. I wish I had joined your services beforehand rather than just as a guest, because what a lovely space you've created to be together and to really, form a community that can ascend above and beyond and get a bigger picture of what our movement really looks like and how we can really navigate not only the grief, but the rage and the confusion sometimes that comes in periods like this, where there's just so much tragedy and so much overwhelm. But yes, I had such a great conversation with Shaylee I guess it's been a couple of weeks now, talking about what Al-Hadaf is doing as an organization to really try and, form community that can not only, again, resist, the very real evils of empire and the ways in which we see the effects of systems of violence and oppression play out on not just the mental, emotional, and spiritual health of our communities, but the very real physical trauma that our people are experiencing, the physical, the murder of hundreds of thousands of our communities. It is quite overwhelming sometimes for me to stop and think about not just the longevity of, for instance, the Palestinian cause, but our greater communities, looking at them not just as pieces of one another, but really looking at the entirety of the global South, looking at the entirety of the colonized experience and the experience of the colonized. And then, of course, the ways in which the colonization, empire, supremacies and ethnic supremacies and ethno-nationalisms and such like that, combined with vehicles like capitalism to destroy our systems that have existed for far longer than these destructive systems have. So in that overwhelm, Al-Hadaf, which again is a Palestinian centered and Palestinian-led organization that is in Kansas City, hoping to revive our community in times of slow murder, as we call it, when there's not an active genocide going on, though we're always experiencing active ethnic cleansing. But also in times of fast murder, where we're able to come together and not only support our community, but now, especially in these end days, can we call them? I'd like to think the end days of our systems and the end days of our oppressions, even if not within the end days of our religious experience or spiritual experience on this pale blue dot in the sky. But where we're trying to form the spaces where community can come together and confront the empire that seeks to destroy us, really. And so when Shaylee and I had our conversation, we talked about some of the tactics and such like that. And I know that we'll cover those. And my understanding is that there will even be some material that we'll all be able to rely on and look forward to in trying to understand tactics that we can embody, model, practice, and teach to one another, so that we can get through these periods of fast murder, as well as just periods, again, where we're watching empire take its final breaths as it tries to stomp out as many of us as possible, whether in periods of leadership and the poor generally, those who are believers, those who, again, transcend beyond any ethno-nationalist borders and are experiencing, our humanness and our human experience in a way that embodies, unfortunately, the struggle. But I also want to kind of go I guess, kind of big picture, small picture for just a moment with what Al-Hadaf has been able to do, and the few things that I think we walked away having learned. But even before I do that, I just wanted to also add in Islam, we also recognize only John named in the Quran, and his name is Yahya, a beautiful name, Yahya. And we see not only his birth as being miraculous, and we observe him as a prophet and as a foreteller of good news, the news, of course, of the prophet Isa, of Jesus's birth and deliverance to the people, but also that he was a person known for good judgment and for piousness, beyond the fact that he was dispossessed, beyond the fact that he was displaced, beyond the fact that he, rejected the material life, and chose instead to be a teacher and a leader to his people. He was beyond that known for, again, just his good judgment. And I think that that's one of the lessons that we can take as being leaders in these spaces and in these movements, is that we have to exercise really good judgment as to what is necessary for our people, what they need to understand and what they need to know, to not be healed in this space. This is not necessarily a space for us to be healed, right? Especially not when we're in active, fast murder of our people and of our communities. It's not a place where we're going to necessarily find peace as we would maybe like to understand peace. It is a place where we are weaving together a fabric, a web, a nest, whichever analogy you choose to seek, with a unified purpose that will keep us strong and engaged with one another. It is not a place where we aren't bringing our broken selves, but it's not necessarily a place where I see, at least, us having a fruitful foundation right now to heal as individuals. Instead, I see our role as needing to come together in our brokenness and bind together as a way of creating strength moving forward. So one thing that Al-Hadaf has had to do, and again, as a Palestinian-led organization, I hesitate to use the word like in contrast to, but in mirrored against an allied organization, is understanding that we as a community are binding together our experiences, our understandings, and our resources to try and form a protection for one another. And that doesn't necessarily, again, involve individual healing in this space or tending to one's individual needs in that space. Whereas sometimes in the ally spaces, as people are kind of becoming, are unveiling new understandings of how empire is really destroying all of us, and understandings of collective liberation and such, have seemed to lean more into the idea that they must address the individual needs of those coming into this community. That's been a unique thing to experience and to observe in the last 9 months. The need within ally-based organizations, so non-Palestinian organizations and community groups, to address things like individual suffering and individual, I guess, again, a tearing away of the veil as they come to a new understanding of the violence of this world. So for those who haven't experienced oppression in a long-standing way, this new understanding is jolting, and it is difficult, and it is, again, a form of awakening. And they have needed to set up some of the systems and the community care sessions and such like that, the healing circles and the vigils that can tend to those communities, whereas we are in our communities doing something slightly different, which is, again, not focusing necessarily on self and using instead our good judgment to step back and say, what do I need in this moment for me to continue to press on? It is not about me as an individual. It is about my community as a whole. And even in my private conversations with friends, longstanding friends, I find that there is a distinct difference between the ways that our communities have survived generations of violence of empire, generations of violence of colonialism, the generational violence of demasculation of our men and of the obliteration of our women and children. The ways in which our systems and the rituals and the ways in which we have operated and lived for, again, generations upon generations, being literally uprooted and changed by the practices of colonization and colonial empire. We have to tend to each other in a different way. And I hope this makes sense. I feel very much like I'm rambling, but I hope this makes sense. And I hope that there's also opportunity for question. And I also don't want to take too much longer, but to really quickly run through some of the things that I believe we're trying to do, some of the practices that not only Al-Hadaf, but I think other aligned organizations that are, again, Palestinian centered and who have experienced this kind of oppressions, particular flavor of violence for a long time. Some of the things that we do. First is to understand that empire seeks to both separate, right, to divide us, but also to polarize, to treat us as if our experiences are so disparate from one another that we may not be able to understand or speak to one another. And I want to refute that. You know, the oppressions and the struggles that we experience because of those systems, they may be different, of course, and the experience that we all have on a daily basis is different, but that is not meant to divide us. It's instead meant so that we understand that we are bringing unique perspective to this. And especially of those of us, again, if you're talking about Palestinian populations, to other people in the Near East, other people in other, again, global South countries who've experienced extreme violence and oppression and of colonization, we all share perspective in a way that allows us to not just not be polarized, but to really pull things back to center, to a point of one and a unity in our cause. The second thing is in the same way that the Church of the Poor is led by the poor, and the revolution is going to be led by the poor, and the next day is going to be led by the poor. In this particular case, not the fight against colonization as a whole, but the Palestinian fight for independence and for autonomy and self-determination is going to be led by Palestinians. It is going to be led by Palestinians. And the role then of the ally groups that surround us, so bravely surround us and so graciously surround us, is to really hold us in that space and protect us. Not, again, because we want to talk about, you know, identity politics and privileges and such like that. We'll have a space for that. But because at the end of the day, we recognize, again, that the goal is to weave together, to come together and to weave together a stronger support system for the ways that we can then amplify one another and move forward. Third is that we can't limit our understanding of injustice or of the terminology of conflict or suffering. We can't limit our understanding of that. What we have experienced, all of us, I believe, likely here, is incredible amounts of privilege and blessing, every single one of us, but to not look at others as if they also don't exist within a space of balancing privilege and oppression, right? Let's not limit our understanding of that, of suffering. There is great joy to be experienced in every moment, and it is our place to try and create that same safety and joy for others by using and by navigating our privileges and our blessings in our life to create those opportunities for the people that we care about and the causes that we care about. The other way is that we tend to draw on our ancestors very much. And I say that as a practical way of pulling ourselves back in and being able to tend again to ourselves while staying within the collective, is that we pull on our ancestors and on the religious and ritualistic traditions that our families have had for generations. Sometimes those feel burdensome. I mean, I'm going to be honest, sometimes those things feel burdensome to us, I know, but we see them in new light when we come under this kind of suffering. when we come under this kind of challenge. And then we root back into them, understanding that the individual, again, ceases to be as important in moments like this, so that we can become stronger as a collective. So we remember where we came from and who our families were and what we were before colonization ruined our countries, where they ruined our, not, and I don't say countries because I want to legitimize the lines drawn in the sand, of course, and the systems that came as a result and the power dynamics, but instead the regions where we are from and the long religious and cultural traditions that we have practiced. Those give us strength. And so we rely very heavily on those. At the end of the day, and I want to close here because I want to move on to our next reflection very eagerly. I'm here to learn very much. And I think that's my last point, is that the self-reflection that comes in times like these, right? Really stepping back and thinking, what am I supposed to be doing in these moments of such incredible overwhelm? What am I supposed to be doing to help, the people who I care for so deeply, but also as a point of challenging the system? Because this isn't about individuals. This isn't about, do you love Palestinians, right? Or do I want to help Palestinians? This is a moment where, again, choose whatever analogy you want. But if the great, big, gigantic beast of empire is our analogy and is our metaphor in this moment, then we are the tips of the spear, ready to plunge into its chest, to subdue it, and to turn it into something completely different, right? To challenge ourselves in this moment, to envision what that difference would be. I watched a horrible movie the other day. I had a horrible strep throat, and I never just pick mindlessly and watch something. I don't hardly watch at all anymore. What joy is there in watching in the middle of this kind of a crisis and genocide? And I don't usually even pick things that are purely for entertainment, so to speak. I'm very much a person who tends to my heart by educating myself. And I'll plug a podcast that has been doing that and really healing my heart in a moment. But I watched this horrible movie, and this girl, she had this opportunity to slay the giant beast, and she did. But then she stabbed him and she defeated him. But before his end and that last final thrust that she could have taken, she stopped. And she gathered up, she realized that she wasn't making the right choice in that moment. And she gathered up the things. There was some amoeba nearby that could restore. It was a fantasy film that could restore this, beast that had been wronged and forced into its position out of injustice of its own experience. And she healed him and created something new to, again, wipe out injustice and then move forward. Again, horrible movie. I don't recommend it. But the lesson that came from it was really incredible, is that this is what we want it to be. We are looking at a thing that has been created and we can destroy it. Unlike us, who are the creation, right? The creation of the spiritual, the all, the God, the one. We are that thing. But the things that we are trying to defeat, the systems that we are trying to defeat, they are things. They are things. They will not destroy us. We will destroy it. And we have the opportunity to reconnect and reframe and rebuild and renew our entire societies with this new balance of not power, but of peace and of goodness and of abundance. Again, to go back to that first message. So to not leave you with the question of what was that plug. Most people say, what renews you? Nature does, right? So many people say nature, some aspect of nature, the rain, the sunshine, going out and walking through the grass, taking deep breaths outside, listening to the rustling trees. These things are real, and it's because that is our connection to the creator. It's to walk outside and look at creation. And how can we look outside at creation? How can we not look at something even as simple as a dandelion and not marvel in what the creator has made for us and what we have an opportunity to then try and create, the balance that we have an opportunity to try and create here in this human experiment. So between nature and learning, and right now that podcast for me is Secrets of Divine Love. It is an incredible podcast that goes through a person's spiritual journey into the heart of Islam, as she says. But it's not about just Islam. It is, again, a return to the idea of the Creator. And the Creator is, of course, the one single point that we all try to come back to. And it's the out again and again idea of looking at it from a big picture and then coming back in to recognize that we are those individual ones that we have to weave together in order to create some sort of a boundary to not only protect the oppressed, the marginalized, the disenfranchised, the dispossessed, and the disassociated. That is our job, that is our goal as humans on this earth. But that once we do so, that we also form a form of protection for ourselves, and we can find healing there on the other side, in this tragic moment per se, but in the movement forward, and hopefully on the other side of our victory. So thank you so much for having me here, and I hope that some of those reflections made sense to other people's understandings as you proceed through this just fight.
Absolutely.